They called it the Pale Dagger, a vessel of rare pedigree, rogue trader lineage, voidborn ambition, gilded halls, stained glass void altars, a bridge carved in mythic inheritance. It sailed into the halo stars under the command of Lady-Captain Erendira Vail, whose lineage traced back to those who first kissed the void in his name. But in the cold dark of the God Emperor's silence, ambition is not always rewarded with revelation. Sometimes the stars answer with hunger. Sometimes memory drifts through the Geller Veil. Sometimes when a ship is forgotten by the Imperium, it forgets itself. This is not a tale of conquest, not of treasure claimed, nor worlds charted. This is the voyage that was never logged, a ship whose vox whispered after it burned, a crew that sang in their sleep, a name etched into black box echoes, and astropathic dreams, shunned by chartists, hunted by silence. This is the Pale Dagger's last voyage. Close your eyes, listen for the bells. If they chime once, it is a memory. If they chime thrice, do not listen further. The Pale Dagger was never formally declared lost. That much is certain. Its final recorded coordinates were far from stable. Along the outer fringes of the Annihilus Drift, an ungoverned volume of fading stellar mass and unremarkable gas veils, barely charted by Mechanicus augurs. Few reasons existed to linger there, even fewer to pass through. Yet Lady-Captain Vail's charter gave her that right. The sacred warrant of trade bore the Vail family crest, scarred with lineage and reforged by debt. She was hunting legacy. In the early vox echoes recovered from astropathic screams, we hear an almost ceremonial calm. Reports of unusual echoes in the warp, murmurs of duplication in command inputs, and crew dreams overlapping in exact detail. These fragments, seemingly innocuous, were passed over in the first review. Rogue traders face stranger things and survive, but then came the sleep. 17 crew entered stasis without order. Others walked in patterns across the observation decks until their feet bled. One held the ship's own pick recording unit to her mouth and whispered prayers not known to any cult. Her voice was not hers. When they tried to send a signal home, the vox turned inward, and the ship began to chart its own path. They found the command throne empty. First Officer Marlowe stood at the center of the Pale Dagger's bridge, staring at the vacant chair as if it were a riddle. The Auspex arrays pulsed in perfect rhythm. Vox relays blinked their unread messages, and the servitor helmsman whispered auto-scripture under their breathless respirations. Everything was functioning. Nothing was occupied. Lady-Captain Erendira Vail had not been seen in 17 hours. No announcement had been made. No orders issued. The internal auger logs recorded her presence at 0700 Terran's standard during routine navigational adjustment near a minor gravity shelf. After that, silence. Her microbead lay inert beside the throne. Her personal seal rested on its plinth. Her command codes, when queried, returned no denial. And yet, the throne was cold. Marlowe did not speak aloud, though his mouth moved. He had commanded in her stead before, during warp shocks, during Geller fold maintenance, but never like this, not in the silence, not when the ship breathed back at him. He turned toward Vox Officer Lyra. Her face was pale, shadowed by the dim lumen strips that now flickered in a cadence she swore was familiar. She met his gaze only once. "She told us not to follow if she walked alone," Lyra said. "She said the bridge would lie." Marlowe stiffened. "When?" Lyra touched her ear. "In the sleep cycle, during silence hour. That's forbidden protocol." She nodded once. "I didn't remember until the glass turned black." He glanced toward the forward display. The star map had collapsed, not offline, not static, collapsed. Stars once tracked by their chartist guilds now showed as blank fields. Coordinates failed to resolve. One designation simply read, "Here." He issued the order for lockdown. Decks 6 through 9 sealed. Primary bulkhead override set to manual. He did not mention the captain. Down in the shrine hold, Confessor Yelecta awoke weeping blood. Not from pain, but recognition. The candles she had lit hours before had not burned down. The incense remained suspended in the air, frozen mid-coil. The bones in her hands, broken from penance long past, now ached in a way she had not felt since Ophelia the Seventh. She rose. Her scripture pages had turned. At the center of the ship, Astropath Vice sat alone in the hexagonal choir vault. His connection to the Astronomicon had thinned, not severed, not scrambled, just reduced, as though filtered through gauze. The Emperor's light still burned, but further away than it had ever felt before. More disturbingly, he could hear the ship now. Not its machine spirit, not its systems. The vessel itself. The Pale Dagger whispered names to him. Not in High Gothic, not in soul pattern. In the voice of someone he knew. A woman, long dead, whose face he could not place. He did not break contact. He simply held his breath and listened. Elsewhere, maintenance teams on Deck 12 reported a momentary drop in gravity. Not full collapse, just a slight lift in motion, like standing at the edge of a dream. Objects trembled. Liquid pooled in reverse. One crewman, Technician 7, reported seeing himself, fully formed, emerging from a corner junction and vanishing around the same bend moments later. He filed the report with one line. "I saw myself before I thought about moving." By the third cycle without the captain, the bridge crew had stopped mentioning her name aloud. Marlowe sat in the command throne now. It did not resist, but it never warmed. The command throne on the Pale Dagger had been passed down through generations of the Vail line. The velvet had long since worn through to the plasteel beneath. The armrests bore etchings not made by hand, but by use. Tiny grooves where Erendira's rings had cut during harsh shifts and sharp orders. The throne knew its owner. It did not know Marlowe. When he leaned into the control panel, attempting to initiate standard stasis rations and bring the long watch crew into rotation, the system refused the order. The denial was not technical. The reason read simply, awaiting command input from primary occupant. He didn't try again. Below the bridge, in Observation Dome 12, Navigator Elthanor stood alone, third eye bandaged. He did not open it. He claimed the void outside had begun to look back. The starfields had ceased movement, though the ship's sensors confirmed steady velocity. The external pick relays showed only a black haze, soft and curling at the edges, like velvet soaked in oil. Elthanor knew the warp. He knew its sickness. This was not the warp. This was something adjacent. When asked for directional status, he merely said, "We are no longer charting. We are being charted." Marlowe considered initiating the emergency silence protocol. Seal off Vox, lock memory logs, cut external feed. But something about the silence already present told him they were past that now. The Pale Dagger had not just lost its captain, it had stopped waiting for one. He called a gathering. They met at the Central Strategium. Confessor Yelecta, Astropath Vice, Chief Lyra, Navigator Elthanor, Engineer Prim Exalt. Each came without speaking first. Each bore something unspoken behind the eyes. Marlowe offered no lies. "We don't know where we are." Elthanor nodded. "We don't know what's happening," Marlowe continued. "No," said Vice. "But we're not dead," Marlowe said. "Not yet." Prim Exalt tilted her head. That depends on how long you've been listening. Confessor Yelecta turned toward the walls. Her eyes narrowed. There's still a pattern, she said. It wants us to believe there isn't, but it repeats. It returns. The chapel floor changed twice. Once after I prayed, once after I doubted. Which did it prefer? Asked Lyra. Yelecta looked down. Doubt. Vice whispered then, so quietly they almost didn't hear it. It said it came from the throne, not ours. The old one. Silence. The Pale Dagger had once held an ancestor throne in its core, long before the bridge redesign, before Vail blood moved into glass corridors and choir pits. A forgotten seat beneath layers of shipbone, abandoned by doctrine, never fully decommissioned. Marlowe rose from the throne. He did not look back at it. The Lordless bridge is a lie, he said. Vice stared ahead, unblinking. Then we go deeper. The crew of the Pale Dagger did not speak of the silence. They adjusted to it as organisms adapt to pressure. Slowly, in stages, until it was no longer noticed. But it was there. Not a silence of sound, but one of meaning. Orders were given, but only in hushed tones. Vox units continued their function, but something in their pitch had grown wrong, compressed like whispers forced through dry cloth. The lumens continued to burn, yet their edges dimmed. Not with power loss, with hesitation. In the corridors leading toward the outer shrine deck, the lights did not flicker. They never had, and that became the problem. Marlowe passed through those hallways often, tasked with security sweeps. It should have comforted him that the lights remained steady, that the systems remained active. But he noticed the dust, not normal detritus, no flakes of fabric, no residue from passage. This dust hadn't settled. It had waited, gathered in corners with no airflow, in symmetrical patterns, untouched by time or boots. He reached out once to swipe it. His glove came back clean. The dust hadn't adhered, it only accepted. He stopped mentioning it in reports. Exalt ran a Tier 3 Auspex diagnostic over the lower data decks after a maintenance cycle returned without logging access timestamps. She assumed a scrub failure. The initial scan returned clean, perfect gradient, stable output. That was the first warning sign. Too clean, she muttered. Diagnostics always had bleed, always showed friction. Stray pings, cooling pulses, echoes of system breath. This read as sterile, as though the area had never existed. She tuned the Auspex down, roughing the filter with Binhuric bias. The result was immediate. A ghost field emerged, not active energy, residual. Stasis remnants, she said. Erendira looked up from her console. We've never had stasis installed, she replied. Exalt didn't correct her. Instead, she printed the readout. 3 layers deep, near the Navwell conduit, was a field bubble. Circular, untouched by footfall or vox. No logs suggested it had been used. But something had rested there once, and something had left. Yelecta, ever quiet, grew quieter. She hadn't spoken since the minor repair incident near the chapel stairs. No injuries, no complications. But she'd stood in place for nearly 15 minutes afterward, staring at the cogwheel above the shrine entrance. When Marlowe found her, she had not blinked once. Everything in its place, she whispered then. Now she refused meals. Vice took note but said nothing. He'd begun logging crew dream patterns, an unofficial duty born of unease. What he found unsettled him more than he expected. Not a single dream matched. Over 2 cycles, across 29 crew, no sequence, no structure, no commonality. One junior voidsman had dreamed of walking through a chapel made of teeth, the icons carved into enamel. Another recalled a prayer vox playing a hymn that started before he was born and ended after he woke. One midshipman reported dreaming of being inside the ship, but the ship was dreaming of her in return. Weiss transcribed every detail. Then he started dreaming too. His dreams had no words, only the sound of gears turning beneath water. Electa refused to enter the shrine hold. Even Erendira changed. She stood before the foredeck shrine as though before a coffin. Her rosary remained at her side, looped through her belt, but untouched. Her lips moved in silent recitation, but the verses were not audible, not even mouthed correctly. She whispered through closed lips. Marlowe saw her once, hands resting lightly on the shrine's armature. Her eyes didn't blink. A tear had traced down her cheek, but it had dried long ago. When she turned to face them during briefings, something had shifted. Her voice was steady, her posture exact, but her presence reduced, as if she had pulled herself inward to avoid being reflected. During one late watch, the upper Vox array reported a burst transmission. Nothing audible, just a timestamp, 7 seconds long. When Exalt played the recording, the room dimmed. No one acknowledged it. The sound was not sound, it was pressure. It passed through their ears like breath through fabric. The recording ended. The Vox console flickered. The name displayed, Erendira. Only her name. No origin code. No Vox identifier. Erendira ordered a purge of the system. The name reappeared 20 minutes later, this time with a suffix. Erendira, too. She did not comment. By the end of the 4th cycle, several shrine candles, previously unlit, had melted. None of the crew claimed to have touched them. Their wax ran sideways, as if the flame had burned contrary to gravity. Exalt ran environmental checks. No changes, no leaks, no power flux, just altered behavior. Weiss began placing incense in the unused halls. It wasn't doctrine. He just needed to smell something that belonged to humanity. Electa did not join the liturgy for 2 nights. When she returned, she stood apart. Her hands no longer held scripture. They were empty, palms up, waiting for something no one offered. Erendira watched her and said nothing. On the 6th day, Marlowe checked the data slates from auxiliary patrols. One name had been added to the roster. He recognized none of the officers. The name was Vail. There was no rank, no clearance mark, no origin. He asked Exalt. She searched the archives. Vail was the name of the ship's first charter line. Long dead. Buried with the house's last scion. When Marlowe returned to his post, his nameplate had been changed. It now read, Vail. He replaced it. 3 hours later, it changed again. Weiss suggested he leave it alone. The ship wants it, he said. That night, Exalt recalibrated the sensory suite for long-range augury. It defaulted to internal diagnostics. She attempted to override. The system locked her out. She opened a maintenance panel. Inside was a mirror. Not a reflection, just her. Watching, not in real time. Behind her, another figure passed. She was alone. Electa dreamed once more. She stood within the Pale Dagger's navcore. She saw each crew member, but they were not flesh. They were outlines, hollow, made of prayer and doubt. The ship breathed beneath her. Its breath moved sideways. When she woke, the rosary was looped through her wrist. She had no memory of retrieving it. Erendira returned to the shrine on the 7th night. She placed her palm on the cogitator's altar stone and whispered a single phrase. The stars have gone quiet. Marlowe, standing near the bulkhead, asked, "You mean the Vox?" Erendira shook her head once. "No," she said. "The stars. They lost Varn on the second day. It was not the kind of loss the Pale Dagger typically recorded. No alarm sounded. No Vox burst relayed emergency coordinates. His name simply ceased being useful, as if the ship had chosen to remove the need for him. Varn had been scheduled to inspect the outer nav array, a routine task. 1 hour under tether, secured by 2 magnet boots and haptic anchors, with a full backup drone on standby. He departed from Port Gate 12, trailing his usual muttered invocations to Saint Dirith of the leashed orbit. He did not return. When Varn failed to report at the scheduled mark, Erendira ordered passive scan. No anomalies, no trauma signals, no breach. They sent the drone. It reached the array easily, crossing the outer vent halo where Varn's last ping had registered. The drone circled the site twice before identifying a suit. It hovered in place, untethered, drifting slowly, almost reverently. The suit was whole, uncut, no puncture, no stress fractures. Its Vox plate was deactivated. The visor had been removed, not shattered or detached, simply undone. No sign of Varn's body, no air trace, no biological residue. Exalt scrubbed the footage. There was a missing moment. Exactly 1 frame per second. A stutter in the data, too rhythmic to be accidental. She reversed the stream. The gap remained. She slowed the clip by a factor of 10. The suit shifted slightly, even while stationary. No engine vents, no gravitational pull. Erendira ordered the suit brought in. The armsman hesitated. In the end, Marlowe brought it back himself, alone. He sealed the cargo lift behind him. When he returned, he did not speak for the rest of the watch. That night, Yelecta stood in the shrine hold, flanked by statues of the martyr choristers, their gold leaf long faded. She did not pray. She simply listened. The ship groaned, not from stress, not from metal fatigue, from somewhere beneath those categories. It sounded like breath remembered in iron. Marlowe submitted a request to arm the maintenance stations. "Double guard, not ceremonial," he said. Weiss denied it. "There is no threat. We are not under attack." His words hung in the air longer than necessary. Exalt, head down over her Auspex matrix, whispered, "The ship has passed a threshold. We no longer observe. We are observed." Erendira said nothing. By the 3rd day, the stars had changed. They were still in the same system, and yet the void beyond no longer matched their cartographic chart. It wasn't drift. It wasn't error. The stars were different. The familiar flare of Charon Delta, once a blinding beacon of red light, now glowed green. The distant nebulae had shifted hues, adopting shades no visual spectrum should reflect. More disturbingly, some stars were absent entirely. The crew checked, resequenced, cross-verified with Mechanicus star charts. The data was internally consistent. It claimed the stars had always been that way, but memory told another story. Worse than absence was what replaced them. A gas giant, once known for its vast ring of ionized metal, catalogued as Vo Primaris, had changed form. Its rings no longer orbited. They hung open like the petals of a moor, an orifice of silence. And around it, its moons arranged themselves with eerie symmetry. 6 celestial bodies, spaced like a teardrop, hung in slow motion. No drift, no natural gravitation could explain their spacing. Yelecta refused to look outside again. Erendira ordered all observation decks sealed. "Switch to reflective mode," she commanded. Bridge displays flicked from external feed to internal. At first it was a mercy, until they realized what the reflections revealed. Each station showed something different. Marlowe's monitor displayed him, but not now. It was him, 15 years younger, in early dagger colors, gunner's mark still new on his collar. He looked distracted, eager. His reflection turned its head before he did. Yelecta's screen flickered once, then displayed her in full novice robes, kneeling in the mess chapel. She remembered that day, the first time she dared pray aloud. Her reflection mouthed words in time with her memory, and then stopped, mid-verse, holding her gaze, mouth open. Vice looked at his own screen and said nothing. It was empty. His reflection did not exist. He did not move, did not ask questions. Exalt ran a diagnostic loop. It failed before completion. Each attempt ended in recursion, looping to the first second of her own service aboard the Dagger, and then replaying in reverse, her birth date listed as pending. Erendira stared at her own console. For a long time, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered, a single image displayed. Stone, cold, worn with time, her own tomb, marked with the seal of the Dagger, dated next year. She rose from the throne. "Power cycle the grid," she ordered. No one moved. Now. Stillness held for 10 seconds. Then Yelecta whispered, "It won't matter." Vice activated the sequence anyway. The lights dimmed and came back brighter. The reflections returned to normal. Mostly. Marlowe's reflection still blinked too slowly. Exalt returned to her station, fingers trembling. "Something's using our past to build the future," she muttered. "But it's not ours. It's what she remembers." "Who?" Erendira asked. No one answered. In the mess, an armsman recited a love letter aloud. He claimed he didn't remember writing it. The page was blank. The audio was recorded. Playback failed. The recording device displayed a message. Sound not authorized. Later that watch, a child's voice echoed through the lower shrine vestibule. The Dagger carried no children. Erendira called all crew to gather in the central command chapel. There she read from the original warrant of trade, a tradition reserved for first voyages and funerary rites. Her voice echoed strangely, as if two versions of herself were speaking, one word behind. At the end, she looked to each face. They looked back in silence, all except Vice. He was weeping. He could not explain why, only that he remembered something and forgot what it was. Yelecta did not dream that night. She watched. From her bed, if one could still call it that, she stared at the faint flicker of light pulsing behind the chamber bulkhead. Not a glow globe, not a malfunction, just a shimmer, slow and deliberate, as though it were mimicking the beat of a sleeping heart. She didn't move, didn't speak. The litanies of vigilance drifted through her mind in slow repetition, but she did not speak them aloud. The Pale Dagger had ceased rewarding prayer. The ship no longer felt asleep. It felt aware of being watched, and of watching back. Marlowe stayed in the shrine hold long past shift rotation. He'd begun using incense like a metronome, lighting stick after stick, not for reverence, but for rhythm. It grounded him, or so he told himself. The smoke wove patterns in the stale air, twisting into spirals that did not dissipate. One trail arced into a perfect circle before falling apart, as though the air had intentions of its own. He wrote a message in ash on the floor. "We are still here." When he returned hours later, it had been rearranged. "Still we are here." The difference struck him harder than he expected. Erendira had not left the command throne for over 20 hours. Her eyes were bloodshot, not from emotion, but from refusal. She would not blink for long. she feared missing something. The monitor beside her showed no faults, but its reflection caught her eye too often. At first it mirrored her posture, then it lagged. Then one blink came when she did not. She made no comment. The throne's leather creaked, always in the same place, over the left ear, a sound she came to anticipate. Exalt stopped going to the lower decks. "I don't map loops," she told them. "I chart flow. Below cargo ring 3, nothing flows. It returns." Vice tried to follow her logs. Every access route led into recursive subfolders. Stairwells tracked as individual entities, no longer part of a structure, but decisions. Even maintenance ducts had multiple entries for the same point, each with different timestamps. "It's fracturing," he muttered. "Not the ship, the causality." When he began logging names of affected crew, his data slate filled 7 pages within an hour. Not because the list was long, because names changed. One woman was listed as Lemia in the morning, melee by third watch, and completely absent by dusk. No one remembered when the shift occurred. One of the gunnery servitors announced the Emperor's name backward during a calibration sweep. It was not flagged as heresy, because it never repeated. By the third day, the Pale Dagger ceased accepting helm input. Erendira stood before the hololith and issued a basic course correction. 43 degrees pitch, negative thrust. The command was acknowledged, but not obeyed. She tried again. On the 4th attempt, the system responded, not vocally, in text. Pale green lettering across the throne's monitor. Noted, declined. She read it twice. She did not repeat the command. Electa entered a fast. No one asked why. No one needed to. She moved through the upper decks in silence. Her rosary cord looped twice around her wrist. The beads had shattered the night before, but she traced them still. Skin peeled from her fingertips where they rubbed imaginary grooves. She sat in the viewport chamber and did not blink for 8 hours. When asked later what she saw, she said, "A vessel, made of regrets." No one asked her to elaborate. The first person to vanish was named Solon, or so Vice said. He remembered Solon's laughter, thin, nasal, always a little too loud. He recalled once passing him outside hydroponics, grumbling about food rations, but no one else remembered him. No record of his birth, no quarters assigned, no duty shift logged. Vice searched 3 different terminals. On one, Solon's name appeared in red. On the next, it was missing entirely. On the last, the space for a name existed, but the field was blank. He did not raise the matter with Erendira. Electa dreamt the following night. She did not remember entering sleep. It came to her like a memory misplaced. The dream had color, but not ordinary hue. It was a palette not known to the living. Light that shimmered with emotion rather than wavelength. She stood aboard the Pale Dagger, but larger, more alive. Its bulkheads throbbed like muscle. Its systems groaned like lungs. She walked through a corridor and heard prayers, her own, echoing not from the vox, but the walls. Each syllable she had ever uttered, each line spoken in fear or devotion or doubt. And then the hull cracked, just a line, from stern to bow, and something beneath the plating began to breathe. When she woke, her bed was soaked through, not with sweat, with salt water. Marlowe found a message on his station console. It wasn't digital, it was etched, scratched into the metal. When you forget her name, she remembers you. He didn't know who wrote it, or who she was. He didn't ask. By the 6th day, the Dagger's engines reduced to hums. Not rhythmic, not idle. A steady chant, 6 notes repeating low and deep, like the belly of a cathedral. Even the oldest crew didn't recognize the resonance pattern. The Elector claimed it matched an ancient chant from the forbidden litany of Persephone Coil, a seer from the pre-Unity era. Exalt found a reference match in a corrupted hymn file. It translated roughly to, "What was cast in void now turns its eye inward." Erendira no longer issued commands. The ship did not disobey. It simply no longer responded. She watched the monitors, not for answers, for movement. Once her own image flickered out of sync. She saw herself seated, staring forward. Then, for an instant, she blinked and the reflection smiled. She had not. Vice entered the engine's sanctum against Exalt's protests. He stood alone in the humming dark. Within 30 seconds, he turned and walked out again. He refused to speak about what he saw. Only Elector asked. She placed a hand on his arm, gently, without demand. "I saw a version of myself," he said. "Older, but not more tired, just disappointed." He left out the part where the other version of him had whispered, "We should have turned away." No one laughed anymore. Laughter had become suspect. When it happened, it sounded wrong, like mockery with no speaker. Once, 2 crew members chuckled quietly at an old mess joke. They were found 3 hours later in a supply closet, still breathing, still laughing, but unmoving, eyes open, fixed on a ceiling they couldn't have seen from that angle. Erendira read old command logs from previous captains. Most ended with navigational entries that looped. Some showed erased sections, manual deletions. Others rewrote themselves in real time. She found one message, half buried under encryption. It read, "If she begins to speak with your voice, do not listen. Memory can lie." Elector broke her fast on the 7th day. She sat beneath the chapel of threaded hands, eating nothing, only sipping from a flask of blessed oil. She wept for the first time. Not from fear, from the sound she heard beneath the deck. A single exhale, deep, slow, and very close. The Pale Dagger did not drift. She leaned. That was the word Vice used first, and it clung to them afterward. Spoken with the uncertainty of a man who trusted instruments, but not what they implied. Her hull did not register motion. Void scan telemetry reported no deviation. Yet every station agreed. The ship's axis had tilted by less than a degree, as if being drawn downward on a plane that should not exist. The stars outside had begun to lose sequence. Erendira noticed it first. The same flare from the red dwarf that had marked the outer fringe now froze, suspended in luminous pause, like a candle mid-flicker. Another binary pair, one yellow, one green, had reversed their spin. The navigational cogitators refused to answer queries in Imperial High Gothic. They shifted back to a Binharic syntax last logged during the Great Scouring. Exalt translated one glyph at a time, but each time she reached the end of a phrase, it warped. "The path lies within," she translated, then paused. The same glyph now read, "The wound lies backward." "Hold," she whispered, unsure who the order was meant for. No one on the bridge contradicted her. The silence was no longer peace. It was something held in restraint. Erendira stood before the hololith, her hands folded behind her back. She watched the projection of the dagger in orbit, but her eyes kept catching something else, her reflection in the lower glass. It was not delayed, not quite. It moved as she did, but the rhythm was wrong. Her double blinked more slowly. Its jaw clenched too late. It smiled once. She didn't. Vice worked the Vox station. No return signal, no static. The external channels had condensed into a single pulse. It repeated every 6 seconds, like a slow, wet heartbeat. It wasn't a call. It wasn't even a scream. It was presence. Below deck, things changed faster. Yelecta's prayers changed. She no longer recited aloud. Her lips moved, but only in mimicry, as if the words had been spoken for her. Her beads snapped hours ago, yet her fingers still traced the pattern, skin cracking from repetition. Marlowe sat on a bulkhead corner, staring at a blank slate. It was meant to be a duty roster. None of the names made sense anymore. Some were familiar, but in the wrong context. Sister Altha, who died 5 years ago, now listed for mess patrol. Gunnery Officer Lais, who'd been posted to another vessel, marked for latrine maintenance. One name reappeared every few minutes. Vilek. He wasn't in the crew archive. He never had been. Still, Weiss saw him near the observation gallery, once walking past the mess, then again, standing quietly in the shrine vestibule. Every time they looked, he vanished just around the corner. By the 5th rotation, the Pale Dagger responded to something. It wasn't a signal. It wasn't warp interference. It was a presence, a shape of thought just beyond comprehension, a pressure against the idea of silence. And then came the form. Suspended in the void ahead of them, not marked by gravitic pull or stellar alignment, floated a structure. It was not large, not looming, just impossible. Roughly oval, slightly collapsed at one end. Its surface bore symbols that flickered between imperial schema and unknown geometries. Its lines were reminiscent of a sensor hub, its silhouette a forgotten relic. The oldest among them likened it to an Arc-class data spindle, something from the days of early Mechanicus expansion, when void beacons were grown, not built. The ship halted, not by engine order. She simply stopped. Exalt turned from her console. Her voice cracked. "Captain, we're not initiating this vector." Erendira nodded once, never removing her gaze from the viewport. "She is." "Who?" There was no answer. Exalt did not repeat her question. The structure, referred to later as the spindle, did not broadcast. No vox echo, no signal pulse. Yet the dagger responded to it like a faithful child. No alarms, no threat displays, only absolute intent. They did not board. No team was formed. No hatches prepared. No rites recited. Instead, they deployed a drone. Basic recon. Auspex equipped. Memory core sealed. It was programmed to survey the outer plating, gather magnetic reads, return. It never crossed the archway. The footage showed the breach. A simple opening. No iris. No mechanical seam. Just a tear in space shaped like an arch. As the drone neared it, its lenses began to blur. Its hull sensors surged. Then, nothing. Static. Its data core returned corrupted, but the drone itself did not return at all. Erendira examined the footage manually, slowing every frame. Only one image remained intact. A single glyph scorched into the upper lip of the breach. A curled line, a spiral, incomplete. Yelecta gasped when she saw it. They had seen the mark before, etched on the underside of the command throne, behind the Vox rack, below the sanctum, where no one had authority to reach. During an early inspection, it had been dismissed as an old weld mark. Exalt ran a cross-reference across her remaining data cores. "It matches the bridge seed," she whispered. Marlowe straightened. Erendira stood. She said nothing. Her hand drifted to the clasp of her command mantle. "We're going beneath." Weiss opened his mouth, then closed it again. He simply nodded. Yelecta's brow furrowed. "Captain, beneath that level. That area was sealed before our tenure. It predates this generation of crew. It's not logged. Erendira's voice was calm. Exactly. The Pale Dagger leaned again. This time, every crew member felt it. Not as vertigo, not as motion sickness. It was something like memory, suddenly recalled, suddenly unfinished. A sensation of having once stood in a different place, on a different day, and not remembering how you returned. The shrine deck lights flickered. Marlowe passed a mirror near the barracks and saw nothing in it, not even the room, just white light. Yelecta found herself in the armory without walking there. She was still holding her missile book. She dropped it. It didn't hit the floor. Exalt locked every hatch. The dagger unlocked them. In the halls, incense burned that no one had lit. Someone was humming. High, breathless, rising in scale. The Vox speakers were off. The crew gathered near the central stairwell, where the command throne split downward through the core decks. The bulkhead wall bore a thin vertical seam. Erendira placed her palm against it. No access panel, no mechanism. Still it opened. A shaft, narrow and smooth, formless. As though carved from a single thought, the descent would take them through the dagger's oldest memory. Erendira looked back at her bridge crew. I will not order you. Yelecta stepped forward. We know! And together they began to descend. There was something beneath the bridge, not in the architectural sense. There were no cables, no struts, no data pylons affixed where the eye could follow, but in presence. A root, unseen yet tangible, pressed into the strata of the Pale Dagger like a seed that had sprouted in reverse, growing downward rather than outward. It moved through sacred conduits and whisper shafts, crawled along forgotten shrine niches and sealed maintenance arteries. It moved not in motion, but in memory, exhaling pulses that were not sound, but weight. No one saw it, yet everyone felt its passage. The ship had become a cradle. What had once been a vessel of plasteel, ordnance, sanctified circuitry, and faith had begun to fold in on itself. Layer upon layer, the dagger was weaving thought into alloy. It was digesting its past. More than that, it was internalizing the crew themselves, winding their liturgies and regrets into its ribs. The ship wasn't haunted. It was hatching. The first tremor came without alert. An old shrine servitor in the mid-hull cathedral failed to reboot after its third kneel cycle. Its autocant looped indefinitely, murmuring in a dead dialect last catalogued on Lysenthos Prime, Circum T7. Its Vox unit hummed with the rhythm of a chant never uploaded. Its optics, milky and uneven, began flashing symbols that had never belonged to the Mechanicus lexicon. Curious, tech acolyte Exalt approached to reboot its core manually. But her code string was overwritten the instant her fingers left the keys. Not rejected, rewritten. Her passphrase had been turned into a hymn. What in the Omnissiah's rot, she whispered, though she did not finish the thought. Vice, standing at the transept door, had seen the change too. That's not malfunction, he said. It's a layering, Exalt replied, reading the rune thread on her slate. A recursive loop made out of data we never entered. Vice nodded once, slowly. It's not a failure. Marlowe joined them from the upper mezzanine, his steps heavier than usual, not out of fatigue, but recognition. This isn't punishment, he said. Then what is it? Vice asked. Marlowe's expression never changed. Emergence. That was when the lower decks stopped responding to interface queries. They descended below Deck 10, abandoning Vox channels that returned only whispered feedback loops. Beneath the known crawlways, past auxiliary crypts and golden-trimmed hatches, sealed since the dagger's last resanctification, they found something they were never meant to find. At bulkhead 34, the walls bore carvings, not standard engravings, not even cultist scratch. The glyphs had been etched too deep and too smoothly. One in particular, a long oval surrounded by radial notches, pulled them forward. Erendira touched it first. The moment her fingers brushed the sigil, the wall pulsed. Not with heat, with memory. Her slate went dead. No logs after that point were ever recorded. Later, she would describe the feeling as being read by something older than the ship's machine spirit. Something behind it, beneath it. Yelecta asked, "What is this?" Erendira didn't answer immediately. She studied the shape, felt its resonance. Then finally, in a voice devoid of uncertainty, she said, "The gate to the bridge seed." Marlowe turned his head. "The what?" She met his gaze, her eyes too still. "The mind before the ship had a name." He paused, lips parting just slightly, then said as if recalling it from some buried place, "The bridge seed." Erendira did not correct him. They passed through the threshold. The corridor changed at once. Where once plasteel supported their boots, the floor now yielded slightly, like a softened dermal weave. The walls glistened faintly, pulsing with bioluminescent veins that radiated colors not native to any known diagnostic band. Pale violet, bruised green, the blue of drowned stars. The light did not brighten the path. It revealed proximity. The closer they moved to certain strands, the more alive those threads became. The air thickened, not stifling, not warm, just heavy. A weight pressed into their lungs that felt like they were inhaling memory. Yelecta began to recite the canticle of emergent sight under her breath. Her rosary clicked softly between her gloved fingers, the stones warm where they should have been cold. Vice paused. The metal of the wall rippled faintly, and in its reflection, he saw his face, but aged, hardened. A version of himself that had chosen differently. The corridor bent, not turned, bent, as though reality had learned how to breathe differently. At its end stood a chamber. It was circular, but not in a way that respected geometry. The curvature shifted slightly, the longer one stared, creating a vertigo not of the eyes, but of certainty. No corners, no center. Yet something sat in the middle, something not built, but grown. A shape neither throne nor altar, flanged with root-like appendages and ridged like vertebrae. The bridge seed. It pulsed slowly, almost imperceptibly, but the pattern matched their breath. Every rhythm of inhale, of eyelid twitch, of subtle muscular shift, they all synchronized with it. It was more than alive. It was aware. Erendira walked forward. Her footsteps did not echo. The chamber dampened all feedback. She placed her hand upon the seed. The chamber inhaled. Not metaphorically. The walls retracted slightly, like lungs filling with the presence of another. A voice followed. Not sourced, not audible in the usual sense. It threaded into the air like resonance. She remembers. Marlowe took a step forward. "Who?" No response. Instead, the voice returned in Erendira's timbre, but twisted, like her voice remembered wrong. "You were always the second. You followed. You listened. She carried the map. You carried the weight." Vice's eyes widened. "This isn't the ship talking," Yelecta murmured. "It's the before." Marlowe asked, "The before of what?" Erendira said, "Of designation." Symbols bloomed across the floor. Glyphs, names, prayers left unfinished. Light traced their outlines. Some names held steady, some flickered and died, all were crew. None were still alive, none were recorded in the roster. One of them read, Captain exempt. Another, vice, unspoken sins. Another, Erendira, reversed oath. Marlowe's name never appeared. "I don't understand," he said. The chamber shuddered, not violently, just enough to remind them they stood inside something aware. Erendira turned her head. "You're not forgotten. You're still unfinished." The walls changed again. They did not ripple. They recalled differently. The path behind them was gone. A hallway now extended from the chamber, lined with images, photographs, old vid prints, places no one had visited, events no one had lived. A bedroom, a child's prayer closet, a burning monastery, a wrecked cruiser filled with golden smoke, all familiar. None remembered. "The ship is remembering us forward," Vice said. Yelecta whispered, "We're being dreamed." They walked. They passed an old chapel filled with statues of people who hadn't died yet. A data vault holding black boxes with their voices inside. A meditation cell where Yelecta heard herself screaming in languages she never learned. Erendira stopped before a bulkhead that hadn't existed moments before. Behind it, light flickered like a dying star. She keyed it open with a glyph none of them had seen her learn. Inside, the original bridge, but older, deteriorated, covered in sanctified ash and extinguished incense. Dead screens flickered with static. The command throne sat empty. No, occupied. Marlowe stepped forward and froze. Seated in the throne was himself. Older, sunken, skin pale. Not corpse pale, memory pale. As if time had forgotten to render him with care. He did not move. He simply was. Erendira approached. "This is the cost," she said. Marlowe shook his head. "This is a lie." "No," she said. "It's remembrance. The dagger doesn't kill its crew. It collects them, preserves them not as they are, but as they might have become." Yelecta knelt, overcome. Preservation through imitation. Vice backed into a dead console. "This isn't death. This is retention. The ship's dream has shape." The facsimile of Marlowe opened its eyes. Blue, dim, a color that held no heat. The bridge seed spoke again, from nowhere and everywhere. "Memory is not truth. It is shape." The facsimile rose. Marlowe stepped away, but it didn't approach. It turned toward the bridge seed and began to walk. Not as Marlowe walked, as something learning how to walk. Vice gripped the console tighter. What happens if it learns everything? Erendira looked at him. "Then we become the forgotten." The room began to unmake itself. Color drained from consoles. Symbols reversed. Vox panes cracked in silence. The facsimile reached the bridge seed and placed a hand upon it. The chamber dimmed. All voices stopped. Only breath remained. Then light, white, vast, empty. Not darkness, not oblivion. Waiting. The Pale Dagger had finished remembering. They did not return the way they came. There was no corridor, no lift, no ladders bolted to steel, no sound of servo motors tracking their movement. The Pale Dagger had unraveled its structure, peeled its architecture away like the skin of an overripe fruit. Its bones remained, but the ship itself had changed purpose. What remained was not a vessel, not a weapon, not a means to cross void. It had become a memory palace, drifting, silent, and alive with thought. They moved through the spaces shaped by recollection, rooms that shouldn't have existed. A kitchen from Erendira's youth, long destroyed in a fire on Tarsis. A prayer crypt Yelecta recognized from a cathedral she visited only once. Vice passed a chamber where the air smelled of frost and metal. his father's cryopod room. Gone now, but here, shaped again in ghost stone and memory walls. Marlowe said nothing. He walked in silence, gaze fixed forward, knuckles white on his belt. If he noticed the memories, he did not let them root. They emerged into the observation vault, or what used to be the vault. Its walls were gone, no domed crystal, no steel enclosure, just black sky and stars that blinked in patterns too deliberate. Space was everywhere, yet they breathed. No one gasped, no suit sealed. The Pale Dagger had erased the need for fear. Suspended above them, like threads of light sewn through emptiness, hung the map. It stretched beyond any mechanical projection. No cogitator could have generated it. No Lex mechanic could read its coordinates. It wasn't a chart of stars, not even of warp vectors. It was a diagram of consequences. Golden threads extended between pinprick lights. Some pulsed, others dimmed. Names hovered at each intersection, not place names but feelings. Moments, judgments, where I lied, where I was forgiven, where she almost turned back. Each thread connected a decision to a new branch. Each branch held echoes of ships that never sailed, prayers never spoken, thoughts never said aloud. The center of the map pulsed faintly. One word etched in slow, glowing light. Here. Marlowe stepped forward. "Where is this?" he asked, his voice barely a breath. Erendira did not look at him. "Where the ship decided we were." Vice knelt slowly, fingers reaching toward one of the threads. It passed through his hand like a dream, yet it tingled. Familiar, not pain, not warmth, like the moment between breath and speech. "This isn't a star chart," he said. "It's a record." "A chart of us," Erendira whispered. "Not where we went, what we became." Yelecta stepped beside her. Her breath shook as she looked upward. "So many," she said. "Every step mapped, every failure lit." She pointed toward a cluster of light toward the left edge of the map, a web labeled, "Where she chose silence." Erendira followed her gaze. Her jaw tightened. That was mine. Farther along, another junction shone, where he stayed. They found Marlowe's memory burned in low amber glow. He didn't look away. More names appeared, not names of people, but of intent. When we almost heard her, where faith wavered but was not broken, where the captain remembered she was loved. The map shifted, though no wind moved. The lights rearranged, tracing new lines, branching futures that had not yet occurred. One path ended in silence, another dissolved mid-line, but one path curved back toward the center. Vice touched that thread again. It burned blue. Erendira stepped forward, her eyes locked on a growing point of light. A new entry appeared. Where we walked away. She touched it. The map responded. Threads realigned. Whole constellations winked out as if never drawn. A corridor of memory collapsed. The ship shuddered once, not violently, like an exhale. The map's brightness dimmed. Yelecta backed away. "If we stay," she said, it keeps all this. We become permanent, fixed in its story." Marlowe looked toward Erendira. "And if we leave?" Vice stared into the dark. "It forgets us." Erendira nodded. "But we remember it." Marlowe hesitated. Then he said, "That's enough." The chamber responded. The light began to recede. The stars faded. The map curled back on itself, folding like ink soaked into old parchment. One final thread glowed brightest of all, where we chose not to remain. A door appeared beside them, not mechanical, not steel, It bore no bolts or sigils. Simple, narrow, upright. Old wood, cracked from time. The kind of door one might find in a childhood home long since reclaimed by earth. It swung open without sound. The bridge waited beyond, restored. Console lights flickered. Instruments hummed in standby. No alarms, no blood. The throne stood vacant, quiet as if it had never been touched. The Pale Dagger had returned to its previous state, not identical, not pretending, just waiting. Erendira entered first. She moved to the command throne. She did not sit. Instead, she placed her seal upon the console. It didn't reject her. It didn't glow. It simply vanished, absorbed. Marlowe stepped to her side. He said nothing. He understood now. The Pale Dagger would not be found again, not through warp charts, not through echoes, only by memory. Only when someone, somewhere, dreamed of a ship and called it by a name they couldn't remember learning. Behind them, Yelecta placed her final votive on the floor. No shrine, just a small light flickering gently. She did not light it. The ship did. Weiss opened the Vox unit one final time, static again, soft like tide against stone. He held it to his ear and waited. A whisper came, not his voice, not the ship's, something just outside. If you hear the bells, don't answer the third. He closed the unit. The Pale Dagger's systems stilled. The shrine hold extinguished its own candles. The engine coil settled into sleep song. A final voice echoed, nowhere and everywhere. The Emperor's light still burns, but not in this place. They stepped into the corridor.
The door closed behind them,
and the Pale Dagger slept.